It's 5:30 already.
Yes, sir.
I call the Washington County Board of Education meeting to order. After a moment of silence, Mr. Fleener will lead us in the pledge.
Please rise.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Fleener. Before we approve the consideration of meeting agenda, we need to add WCEA to the agenda.
Make a motion to approve as amended.
Have a second?
I'll second.
Discussion? Roll call, please. Ms. Jennifer?
And second.
I don't have it, Dave. Here it is.
I'll agree.
Thank you. Can I get a motion to approve the consideration of meeting agenda as amended?
So moved.
Second. Discussion? Go ahead, open up for vote, please.
Sorry. Open. I'll agree.
Thank you. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes, please?
So moved.
Second.
Second. Any discussion? Go ahead and roll call, or open up to vote, please.
It's open. I'll agree.
Thank you. Now I'll turn it over to our directors for his report.
I have several reports as you can see in front of you, and I want to start with the ESSER 3.0 update. This also is actually an overview of the work that we've been doing over the last several months. And after I give the summary, I'll ask the board to consider approval of this report or this application to send to the Tennessee Department of Education for review and feedback. So just to begin, in our work session, we discussed and reviewed the summary of items that over a period of time that we culled down with the amount of money for ESSER 3. Our total amount of money that we have been allocated available to us as we make this application is $11.9 million, a little more than that, a little over that. And our goal is to ensure that, a high percentage, our goal was 50%, focuses on learning loss and instructional supports and improvements, whether that's in programs and resources like that or in personnel, and including social emotional supports like social workers and other personnel of that nature. Our total amount in the instructional category that we discussed at the work session for instructional student supports and program supports was $4.562 million over the next 3 years. It included, as I mentioned, career counselors at the 2 high schools that would also serve the feeder schools, 7 through 12, mental health supports, whether programming or like I said, social workers, 4 social workers across our county to provide additional layers of social emotional support for our students and connecting our students to resources and their families to resources in the community. The big item was $2.3 million for certified teachers for high dosage tutoring for eligible students over the next 3 years. That was a big portion of our recommended funds in our application. You know, high dosage tutoring means small groups, 1 to 3 ratios, and really focused on the areas of their you know, learning loss or their gaps. So we would be rolling out, if approved, looking for tutors to work in those small groups, certain qualified tutors to work with students. The intent of that over the next 3 years with these funds, because these funds run from, you know, this fiscal year through September 30th, 2024 is the final spending deadline. So, you know, that previous school year basically. But we'd identify groups that with the greatest need, groups of students, and provide them these supports during the school day, tutoring during the school day. So, you know, that's a big focus. That high dosage terminology and the low ratio just, you know, is intended, and research really supports. That's how you move students. We actually have experience in Washington County in the past with doing this kind of intervention with some of our schools that had some challenges with some student achievement challenges, and we're on one of the state lists, and this helped them get off of those type of lists and increase student achievement. So we're really excited about working with the state who has, you know, they are providing additional resources to support this. So in addition to our costs, they will be providing those supports.
So what does that look like with those tutors in a school day? Is that like part of RTI? Is it?
Right now,
is it
the 2 times a week, 30 minutes a day, we'll identify the groups, and they'll just be at appropriate times. You know, we want to, certainly core instruction, we want to protect that, but we'll be looking, and we also, you know, it's very limited because we have to also protect some of the related arts time. We don't want them to miss PE, so it'll be a scheduling challenge, but I think we can manage the challenge.
So that student will be missing instruction in the classroom?
No. You know, the core instruction, so tier 1 instruction, as we would call it, that would maintain as a priority. So times where they might be working or they might be allowed to work independently, that would be times for those students we could target and have them in that tutoring session, led by a certified teacher.
Thank you.
Yes, those are just some highlights. The other highlights are summer school. The cost in these 3-year costs is to continue supporting our summer learning programs, including transportation. You know, we were able to receive additional funds this summer to help offset the cost of transportation, but we know it's important if we're going to provide that for summer, we need to also provide transportation. And then our after school program as well, same concept with our LEAPS after school program. Those are targeting high need students, and transportation is usually the barrier, so we're budgeting money to provide transportation at South Central that has that LEAPS after school program. In addition to summer school costs, the other costs we are adding using ESSER dollars for other high risk or high need area of students. Our ESL teacher, we're adding an additional ESL teacher for the next 3 years to help address the needs with our EL population. Overcome the achievement gaps. You know, something that we aren't, you know, it's just not discussing in depth tonight, but just to have a chance to talk about it. The state highlighted the TCAT data from this past year, and it's still embargoed for district data, so we're not in a position to discuss our specific district data. But the state report was, overall we saw as a state learning loss in all categories, all grades, all subjects, and it particularly negatively impacted subgroups like our EL students, our English language learners, and minority students, and low socioeconomic students. So
When is that supposed to be out?
our data will be unembargoed and publicly released after August 11th next week. So we've been digging in and it's disaggregating and looking at it, but we'll be excited to share our data publicly. There are spots that certainly will be very glaring that we have a lot of work to do, but there also will be some bright spots that we want to share both, and then also talk about what we need to do next. That'll begin that process next week. I just called all that out because ESL is one of the areas not just statewide, but in Washington County, one of those groups that's going to show, definitely a huge increase in the achievement gap with those students compared to everyone else. Other supports, some social motion supports, and we're continuing also. We have provided those access points for students, even though remote learning is not our intention this year at all. And if we're fortunate, we won't have to implement those strategies on a large scale, but we still need to have internet access for students, even if they're in-person learning, to have access at home if we expect them to do some of their work at home. So we're also continuing with that, those services, and paying for it out of ESSER. So that's, our goal was 50% of the 11.9 million to be focused on instruction. Unfortunately, we hit 49%. So the other 51% right now is the discussion we've been having ongoing. Eligible costs or eligible expenses that districts can use this money for include maintenance and deferred maintenance items, and particularly when it's to improve the learning environment. So 5.9 million has been budgeted for the replacement of the Boone and Crockett HVAC system and controls to improve the air quality in those two large schools. And they're due, as far as replacement anyway, they're due for replacement of those units. So that's the other 51% thereabout of the expenses. Yes, ma'am.
So will that affect us putting the ionization units in?
No.
At this point?
There is a timing issue in the sense we'll install those ionization units, and when we get to the Boone and Crockett project, those can then be fit into the new design.
Okay,
So,
we won't have
it's
to
something
repurchase those.
that we've confirmed that they'll fit within the upgrades that we would do in the future.
Okay.
The other thing that's included in that 48%, I'm just reading down my list. I've covered the deferred maintenance and highlighted the instructional interventions to address learning loss. One other that we want to do and what we've budgeted for is what's called school-based allocations. We want our schools to have the opportunity, based on their student enrollment, to receive funds to identify instructional strategies and supports and programs that are specific to their school and make site-based decisions for those programs and supports. So we've allocated 1.2 million for that right now. Consequently, if for example, if the deferred maintenance and we do our bids and it comes in much lower than what we budgeted, I would anticipate a recommendation for me in the future of taking those remaining funds and putting it into the school-based allocation so they have additional funds. But this 1.2 million is based on $50 per student per year, based on their enrollment. So that'll be a piece that the schools will have to identify needs, instructional needs, and determine how they're going to spend those funds. So the total, as I said, you add all those up, we totaled $11,753,190. That leaves $210,000 as what's called indirect cost. We're allowed to designate 17.51% as indirect cost, but $200,000 is much lower than that percentage, and that just gives us flexibility. One use of this funds is it was suggested by the Department of Education with the amount of money and the amount of accountability and required paperwork that we consider hiring a coordinator during these 3 years. So in those indirect cost funds would be the hiring that position that would only be effective until the end of the money, which is September 30th, 2024. That position would go away at that point. So the total, of course, is $11,963,190. What's in your packet? Yes, ma'am.
I know you're on a roll, but this is
tell
where
me
I
to
want
be
to
quiet
stop.
and ask
So
questions.
this
Yes,
is
ma'am.
something that other systems in the area are doing?
Yes, ma'am.
Almost all.
It'll be unique to each district as far as what would be on, quote, their list and what would be in their application. But yes, ma'am. You know, we put out a survey in June. It was to the community. We left it active until for about a month in July. The feedback we received aligns to these categories that I've read off. You know, actually every category, at least 50% of the people responded said we needed it. So you know, it was interesting that we had 50% of that.
How did the state come up with the figure that we got?
That 11 million?
Yes.
And then
Because
even previous too.
You know, Johnson City, they said, I heard they got like 13 million. And we got more kids than they do, so I mean, what?
Free and reduced funds.
It's that they have a higher rate of
Free and
students that was, you know, that are eligible for federal funds. Yeah, so it was based on those formulas. So we had a lower rate, even if our enrollment is equal or even higher.
Yeah.
Because of that, they ended up getting more funds directed to them. So,
These people that we're hiring, are we offering the insurance? And
yeah, they're full-time employees. With full transparency with anyone that's hired with ESSER dollars, that this is for a period of time. And of course, as things come open and they're qualified, they can apply and move into those positions. But for those specific positions, they do have a time limit. But they're full-time employees.
Mr. Swain?
I'd like to make a motion that we approve this application and the monies that you've spent, you need that, right?
Yes, sir. Also, if you could include in your language, approve in the application the budget and any subsequent amendments. That's coming, I guess, from Mr. Hale and Mr. Whitaker.
Make a motion that we approve the application and the budget and any amendments that need to be made at a later date.
Second.
Discussion?
This is all in the federal fund, isn't that correct, sir?
Yes, sir. It's all federal dollars.
But I mean, it's accounted for in the federal fund.
142 fund.
Right.
Yes, sir. And I believe that's why this language is important, because when we have federal dollars, we ask the board to make sure that phrase of the budget and all subsequent amendments is included in the motion.
Mr. Swain?
Just want to say too, thank you for opening it up to the community to have a chance to speak on different, you know, on what they'd like to see this money for. So just appreciate you doing that.
Well, we had two forums at both high schools. You know, not a tremendous turnout, but you know, the small group, it was great discussion. We will on that, and it's a requirement, but I think it should be done anyway whether it's a requirement. We will be creating a website specific to these dollars, and so all the I guess activity on these dollars with these items in progress towards the goals that are associated with these items will be on that website, so the public can see and then submit any questions that they have specific to answer through.
Anybody else?
I really think you're gonna have trouble filling them.
But that is a challenge, and you know, not just for Washington County. It will be a challenge. You know, we'll continue to do what I know Washington County's had to do, and our neighbors have had to do. We'll just continue to be persistent in trying to find people that
Maybe
would
some
be interested.
retired teachers that wants to come back.
That would be
and
for
work.
tutoring. That would be wonderful.
Anybody else? All right, Jen, let's vote, please.
Tyson?
Ain't got yet.
Steaming. How do you vote?
Yay.
All approved.
Thank you. Next item, just quick, a TCAT update. You know, continue, the board authorized me and Chair Day to continue to work through. I did have the agreement with the TCAT with Mr. Blevins. I met with Mr. Blevins. You know, where we're at is certainly they're in position to move forward. There's still some steps to take. In the agreement, you know, does require the board to give TVR the control of that property. That, you know, they're not going to spend $14 million in improving the property and maintaining the property. unless they have that kind of control. But if it ever ceases to be and operate as a TCAT for Washington County, the property would, and everything on it would revert back to the board. And that's in the agreement. So, so what is next is, Mr. Blevins said, there's a meeting next week in Nashville with the governor and others, not just for our project, but for several like it. And after that day, after the 12th, we'll know certainly the timeline, and then we would like to, when we sign this agreement, when Chairman Day is in a position to sign it, we want to invite everyone, make sure everybody has a chance to be there, because it's a really big deal in Washington County. And it'll be a partnership for, for higher ed and post-secondary opportunities for all citizens in Washington County, but for our students, and also for Johnson City students in Science Hill that would be, going in the direction of the programs there. It'll be a good partnership of all three groups. So really looking forward to that day, and looking forward to the progress thereafter. Are there any questions about that?
Is that all the property, every bit of it? Because, they were talking about, so
Well, the entire property in the agreement, some language about, in the future, if the board sought to build a high school specific structure that would complement the TCAT that they will build, the plan is to demolish that round part, if not the whole building, and replace it with a brand new facility that's a TCAT. But there will be enough property in the agreement, the board would have the flexibility to say, we want to take this segment and build a high school specific property, so we can send our high school students there that then would flow right into the TCAT program. So yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Are you, your timeline for this, do you think I know you've got to go to Nashville, but, what are you thinking in terms of when we can get it onto somebody else's nickel as far as utilities?
There's a lot of layers in between this when it happens, but in talking with Mr. Blevins, the key will be these next meetings. It would be, I would dare say it's going to be before the end of this year.
Because some of that space they could go ahead and start using immediately, the classrooms.
And that's what Mr. Blevins indicated.
Yeah.
That especially the rectangular portion of the building, they could begin and launch some programming there. Then stage the plan where they demo the front and then start to prepare to build the
It'd be great
replacement.
if they were in there, starting in 2022.
They wanted to be in here in there right now, but it just didn't happen. Yes. If there's no questions, that I will move to the next report, and this just for your awareness and public record. It is just the personnel report for the month. All of the activity, and just keep in mind July is a very active month. June and July are very active months as far as personnel goes, both incoming and outgoing. Enrollment updates. If we could, what I pulled up is that enrollment numbers, the bottom one. Just to give you a snapshot of this week where we're at right now, if Heath can get that pulled up. As he does, the big number right now, with the huge asterisks, is this changes daily, both going up and down. And we do have some schools that we've monitored since Monday, and will continue to do so for the next, probably through next week, if not the week after, with some of the movement. We have some areas that are high enrollment as far as classes. We've had to address some areas and add new positions because they were out of compliance. And we had no other way to address the issues by moving internally. So we've had to add new teachers at some of our schools, and there's still some hot spots. So we'll continue to monitor this. But the bottom, if you'll go to the very bottom, the total enrollment, you can see those numbers by grade level. You can see the total enrollment right now is 8,400. We ended the year less than 7,900. So just earlier today at the HUE committee, Dr. Barnett reported in Johnson City, and he indicated their enrollment's up, and we're right there in the same position they are as far as higher than it was last year.
Crockett's enrollment has gone up, hasn't it? Looks like.
The what?
Crockett.
Yeah, actually, if you'll go to Crockett,
1,286.
yeah, it actually is above Boone. You know, not much, but about 20 students.
That's not been done in a long time.
So, but, you know, these numbers, we'll know in about, like I said, in another week or 10 days, how solid those are.
They got a big senior class, 350.
Yeah.
Do you think this next new COVID cases are going to affect it?
Well, of course, as families make decisions.
Right, that's what I'm concerned about, yeah.
Yeah, me too. I mean, in more than just enrollment numbers, but yes, ma'am. But right now, this is where it is. The kindergarten class, you know, in June, we hadn't had everyone register. In July, they started registering for kindergarten. And that area has certainly been an area where we've had a lot of high numbers and had to add some teachers across several schools.
We just scroll back down to the bottom, because, you know, if you look at the totals, yeah, kindergarten, what, 578?
Yes, sir.
But, you know, if you look at kindergarten through K through 5, we're hitting a trough, we're going to hit a trough, it looks like, unless you know,
Sure.
something changes.
Yes, sir. Yeah, you can see that as that moves through, if they don't increase.
Right.
But
So the pre-K at Boone's Creek, the one that's the people pay for, has 24 in it now?
the tuition base.
The tuition base.
But, you know, we're gonna report and update these numbers daily, and then any
Right.
significant changes, I'll certainly always share with the
That'd be
board.
great.
But, next month, it will be, I think, a really solid number in September's board meeting.
So we've got a copy of this.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Facilities update, what I realized, and you know, we're trying to just show you the distribution of the type of work that our maintenance department is doing. There is a component of this report missing that I will make sure is corrected next time. I did not notice it, and I apologize. I've asked, and we need to report the breakdown by school as well, and this doesn't have the individual school detail that you need. And then also, you pointed, a board member or two pointed out, there's a category called miscellaneous. We need to be more, you know, detailed in our description. Miscellaneous is a catch-all, and there shouldn't be that many items in miscellaneous.
Be the majority.
So we're going to work on our categorization of things. Yes, ma'am.
Are these completed or new ones written? And
These are in
what
progress.
period?
Yes, sir. These are what's in their
He's currently
queue.
working on right now?
Yes, sir. It's what's in their queue.
Okay.
Mr. Boyd, how's the tracking of the work orders going, the process to track all that? Is that improving, or how's that going?
It will improve. I mean, it's still early, and they've been using the system, but I think us being more mindful about the monitoring and making reflection about areas that we have high numbers are taking too long to address. That's really my concern. We need to be timely.
Yes.
And some of these things, they can't really prevent some of these things from happening, but we can respond and repair quickly.
Thank you.
And I do know, just like in a lot of places and other businesses, you know, our maintenance staff right now has a few unfilled positions, or they're down a few people. So, you know, they're doing a lot of crosswork and having to scramble a little bit because of some gaps in their personnel. But they're keeping up the best they can. Field trips are just for your information. Right now, we don't have many, but I expect we will begin to have more. And then just as a reminder, anything that's overnight or out of state requires board action. Anything that's local or is not out of state or overnight is just approved by the director, by me. Financials, I know Mr. Hill walked in with a big tall stack of papers. You all have had these items. They were discussed in the work session. If you have any questions, Mr. Hill can address. If not, it's just for your full awareness and for public record.
We need
to approve those
No,
financials?
no actions are required on these. This is just so we make sure it's in the minutes and it's in the public record, so for transparency. Grant update, there's not a big list. We did have one, grant to highlight, and that's in the report. One of our teachers received a grant to develop their leadership skills, so that's good. And then finally, as we wrap up the director's report, as part of the contract when the board hired me is, a timeline as we work on finalizing a final strategic plan. The timeline was in August, I would just provide an update, and in September I would present. I presented a very big overview of just a few items at the startup date or the teacher convocation, the first day the teacher reported a week ago Monday. The things that I want to make sure the board is aware from the work that the board and committees had done prior to me coming. The 4 areas of priority will be included in the strategic plan, as well as measurables. Measurables will be, focus on every student every day. That will be in academics and also our non-academic supports that we provide and how we're going to measure our success. And then we're going to invest in our people. What kinds of growth opportunities we provide our employees, our teachers, what kinds of supports we provide for our employees, how we're attracting, retaining, and supporting, the best qualified team members. That'll be invest our people, partner with our stakeholders. That will be us improving our communication as a school system, both internally and to our public, who we serve. And then also our critical partners. TCAT would be an example of that. Some measurables around our partnership with TCAT, with our county commission, improving our relationship with county commission, and so on. And then finally, act with responsible stewardship. That'll be development of our 10-year facility plan that we have on the agenda item tonight to take those steps. It'll be transparency and reporting our financials and things like our ESSER, progress on our ESSER dollars. It'll be equity across all schools, make sure every school has resources they need, and even to some extent, what Mr. Riddle just mentioned about our maintenance. We're going to set measurables on how we're going to be more effective and efficient in our services to our schools, to our departments, and have measurables for that. So those 4 areas will be in the final draft that I present to you in September. Otherwise, I think that's all. That's a lot of information, but that's all of the director's reports.
Any questions? Hearing none, we'll move on. Can I get approval for consideration of the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second. Any discussion?
I just have a question.
Mm-hmm.
So the vehicle authorization report,
Mm-hmm.
I don't have it, like it's not there.
Should have been in your workshop.
But it's not
It's
attached
not,
to you.
okay.
Oops, that'd be me.
Well, that would be us.
Was it on the
It was
workshop
in the
agenda?
workshop, yeah. Yeah, you all reviewed it. at
We
the
just didn't
workshop.
carry that forward.
Move it over.
Can you pull it up in the workshop agenda, Annette?
I'm looking at it. We can get to it.
She's pulling it up too, Annette.
It's attached to me. You haven't pulled up, Ken?
Please.
It's on the screen.
Oh, I have it.
Oh, okay.
These vehicles, of course, are those that are assigned to individuals, whether they're on call or they have duties that might require them different times, different times to go to a school. So all of these are transportation related and maintenance and technology.
I just didn't know if it was the purchase one, like we have a purchase one.
Now, it's just a list of those that are authorized to have vehicles assigned to them
And I'll get-
after hours. Yes, sir.
Anybody else?
Well, I would like to say, when we have to go to replace some of these, I'd like to see us look at going to smaller vehicles, and, you know.
What is the life of a vehicle, I guess, for us? I mean,
Typically for a school system, I would say well over 250,000 miles.
yeah.
So many, many years, usually I'd say 10 years is a
I just know we got some
reasonable
some
lifespan,
06,
not more.
07s, 08s, and, you know, they're going on 12,
Yeah.
14-year-old.
Dad's driving a van that's got 268,000 miles on it.
As long as they continue running and they provide what they need and they're safe for our employees, we should keep them in use.
I mean, some of them vehicles right there that I'd like to see maybe one of these days move over into grounds and put maybe a minivan or something back in there to, because, you know,
Did we determine how much this is costing a month, or did that ever come up? Or-
We have
I thought
not done
had
that.
it- Did we have it done last
Cost
year?
analysis.
I thought we were looking into that.
It's, the number of vehicles going home has shrunk in the past
So it has
2 years. It
shrunk,
used to be
okay.
like 2 or 3 pages, now it's 1. So, I mean, I think that's as efficient as we can get, and you get down to 1 page, and after 3 or 4 pages of them, huh?
It's on 2 pages.
Oh, is it 2 pages? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Chad. It used to be a lot more.
Okay.
So we have,
All right.
we have shrunk it down.
I
What do
mean,
you think,
we'll
Seth?
continue to look at those opportunities. And then,
Down over there.
you know, as Ms. Urban said, some of these larger trucks, if their primary duties don't require them to have all of that space, and as we replace those, we might look at something smaller, more economical.
And all of these people are on call.
Yeah, they either have, or they have responsibilities if something were to happen, whether a chiller goes down, they are the ones that have to respond.
Okay.
And then our mechanics, you know, they may have, because we allow most of our buses, when they're in use, they park them at home, so they may be away from the transportation, the
Right.
bus garage, and they have to go out and service them away from the garage. So,
Anybody else? Go ahead, open it.
I didn't take them. All approved.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is our discussion and presentations, Jonesboro Building Project update. Mr. Boyd?
Yes, sir, and just an update, it's not an action item. We were invited this week, Tuesday, to go to Johnson City to the architect's office and look at the plans for the project, get some updates and listen to the contractor that's going to be involved in the project, have our questions answered, and get ready for the next steps. You know, several board members were there. I don't know if any of you have any insight you would like to share with the board members. I think their intent, if I heard correctly, you know, they want to move forward with the project this fall. Sooner than later.
Groundbreaking, middle of September, possible.
Yes, ma'am, possible. And everything has to be prefaced with possible.
Possible.
Or
Right.
the goal is, or that's what we want to see happen. But, you know, it's exciting to see, and a building project's always exciting, and I know several of you have been through those, but it's still exciting. I mean, when we see groundbreaking, we start seeing the equipment on the site, and then when we start seeing structures going up, you know, it gets more exciting, but then it seems to take forever to get to the finish line. I believe we're looking at a 24-month construction period whenever they, you know, begin.
Thank you. Next, approval to develop and release RFP for the long-range facility study. But this is an action item, so we would need to have approval for a motion. Mr. Flynn?
I'll make a motion, we send this RFP out for Dr. Boyd, Mr. Boyd and his team to develop a plan and send out to the city what comes back, the bids come back, yes.
I'll second that, and, but I would like to say, and I don't remember, Mr. Boyd, if, we were looking at facilities review, but I think it is important, it's going to be important for us to look at demographics.
Yes, sir.
Projections, facility utilization, all those things. So if you can.
Yes, my notes say we will seek a qualified, company to conduct a comprehensive assessment of our facilities and a demographic study to project future facilities needs.
I'm just a little hesitant on this because right now, as we're kind of going into another phase of our COVID, I just don't know if we're going to be getting a true picture, especially as important as our attendance, student enrollment would be, that could possibly be whether or not we end up closing a school in the middle of a COVID situation. I just don't know if we're going to get a clear picture. I'm not saying I am against it, I'm just saying I question the timing.
Sure.
I would like maybe a little later on down until we get a little more, I just think that would be a little bit better money spent.
The demographic study, certainly, I think we can assess the status of our systems, each building and the status of their mechanical system, exterior, surfaces, everything, and get a good baseline
And then
in
possibly
that study. And then maybe we have a different approach with the demographic study. But I think it is important to move forward with assessing the current status of all of our facilities, so we have a good baseline to work from.
maybe look at our attendance at each school or enrollment at each school later on after we look at that, or,
We
Okay.
can, but I do believe it's important we get our facilities and grounds and get a good index of where each one of those are. And then ultimately, when you do that, as you look for long-range plans, no matter the demographic, if you're going to update a building, you kind of prioritize which one falls on that scale.
Okay.
And this will be brought back to us.
Oh, yeah.
Prior to
You all
the-
have final
I
approval.
just wanted to make sure that, something as important as this, whether or not we have to close a school, it's kind of iffy, as far as people maybe homeschooling due to
Yes, ma'am.
different things,
The phase one would be a facilities and grounds assessment of the conditions and to prioritize what areas we need to focus on if we're going to improve schools or renovate a school.
Okay.
Mr. Hammond?
We're not bound by any company that bids. So if you don't feel comfortable with it, your staff or the board,
It's an RFP process, plus ultimately the board would approve it. Essentially, we would want to get qualified companies to interview about, how they would provide the service, and then from that, we and the board would select from the company that best fits Washington County Schools.
Anybody else? Let's vote, Jennifer.
Second. It carries, one vote no.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is our athletic passes. I know we kind of went away from them last year, but in your BOE Connect, Jennifer has put in kind of what we would like to present. The only changes is where we're going to take out the directors of school passes that we've had over the years. And then the high school goes to Big 5 rather than Big 7. But all other passes will be used as we always have.
So we're taking out 3.
Taking out number 3.
There won't be any of those.
I recommend taking that out.
Okay, and then,
What's because I haven't been here when we've had the colored badges, so what's the rationale for having multiple color? Are these the things that the staff and the teachers, professional staff wear day in and day out?
What's issued to them? Yes.
So the different colors differentiate some of that?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Flame?
I'll make a motion, we approve this by taking out number 3, but also any staff with an identification badge would be able to get in free.
Staff or employees?
Employee or staff, I was
There
considering
is
it to
your
be the same
badge.
thing. Yep.
Second discussion, Mr.
Wait a minute. So you're putting the substitute teachers up in number one? Is that what you're saying to me? Okay, just want to clarify.
Mr. Herbert?
Well, I'd like to hear the director's excuse for not giving out. I took them passes and I give it to people that has, you know, several kids. And it costs a lot of money for them to go to ball games and stuff. And I've not just give it to just any, you know, Tom, Dick, and Harry. I just give it to somebody that looked like they really needed it.
Yes, sir.
And would appreciate it. And I just, you know,
Well, and it may be just me working in a different environment. My opinion is that falls to the principal. And what I've worked with principals for years, and as a high school principal, if I had a board member call and say, I would like, 5 will call tickets, then whether as a principal or a superintendent, I would suggest to that principal that's probably a good consideration you need to think about. So I'm not trying to pass off my responsibility. I just think, principals need to have that involvement. And then in each game, so I think you still have that leeway and you deserve that. And we have other dignitaries, if they're in town, if we want to put them on the will call list or the pass list, we will. The only exception is when we get to playoffs, and that's governed by TSSAA, then we have very little control over how those passes are.
I probably ain't got over 5 passes, maybe each year. And I've given them to people that need them, so.
So is there some kind of direction that you've given the principals for that?
Just that especially the high school principals, I would expect them to manage that.
I was just asking if there was clarification
Do
or
they know
communication.
to manage it?
In my conversations with them, they said, of course, if we get a request, we tried to honor that. But if the board feels more comfortable of me managing it, I don't have a problem doing that. I just feel strongly, with the principals being responsible to oversee those facilities and having the athletic directors report to them, I think that's where that would fall.
The principals would know those in need.
Sure, or yes, and then always, hopefully, I don't know, but I also receive TSSAA passes, so I don't get many because TSSAA doesn't give many out, but I'd be glad to sign those out to any board member.
That's right.
Any more discussion? Let's vote, Jennifer.
Second. Maybe.
Vote closed.
Just to make sure.
Mr. Irvin, is it on yours?
Keith, yours working?
Yeah, I voted once.
There it goes. Being approved, 1 no.
Thank you. Next is approval to implement Frontline Human Resources online platform. This is an action item.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Boyd?
We've been reviewing options for something that currently Washington County does not practice or have, is an online applicant system. We still do paper applications, processes that, while effective because the staff that have been doing it for a while, they do it very well. But I think, number one, it's 2021, we can implement an online application system, and it would also improve our workflow to make it digital, and we also would have an audit trail, or so if something is stuck on somebody's inbox, we would definitely know where the hole is. That's not the only reason, but digital, there's a lot of benefits. We would then also, I think we would reach more. It seems people now have access the paper, print it off, fill it out, turn it in, and then several other paper items they have to manually turn in here. I think it would improve our workflow tremendously. And then we would have a record, and we also could more actively recruit people over digital media with this platform.
I make a motion, we approve this.
Well, which,
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No,
no,
Oh, I thought that's what we were already doing.
but there's two different ones.
well, the front line is the one I recommend, but there's an item with the full version, which we will call also includes a system that tracks our teachers, not just tracks, but is a system that manages their professional learning. I recommend that we begin this year with the frontline services that does not include the professional learning platform, and then we consider that in future years. But I think let's implement this first, utilize the online application system and learn how to do that, and then talk about the professional learning platform in another year. So that would be in your documents. That would be the item is entitled "Frontline without professional." So it's without the professional learning platform cost.
Ms. Dillinger, do you want to make your motion
Yes.
as stated?
Yes.
Do we have a second?
And it's that's what we're looking at on the screen.
Yeah, the first year implementation cost is the top,
Right,
without the professional learning,
okay.
and then you see the 3-year recurring cost.
So-
Those prices are locked in for the next 3 years. That's why they're listed that way.
So 33,570.
For implementation and then the use of the service this year, yes, sir. It's an annual recurring subscription, but the first year of implementation with data and training and other aspects has a cost.
We have a motion, we have a second. Any more discussion?
It's very necessary, because if anybody's ever had a reference they wanted to, somebody sends out, it's electronic, you fill it out and you send it. I don't even know what we've done before now. I guess had to do everything by paper, going around and mailing in references, or, yeah, it's time.
We do. I mean, it's
It's well
amazing
overdue.
what Heather and HR does.
Oh, yeah.
I think this will also enable her to do
Right.
some other things as well.
Will we need to reallocate any budget funds, or is this all?
Now, we're going to work within our approved funds. We may have to look at some category moves, but Mr. Hill, you certainly can address that right now if you'd like.
It'll initially go into the IT category where we pay yearly subscriptions, and there's some, of course, several moving parts, many parts placed in the budget. So by the end of the year, you're grinning, I know you know that. So by the end of the year, it's very likely I'll just reallocate funds from one category and move into that particular line item. The 72,250,399 is the allocation.
Currently, because of just past practice, in the chart of accounts, we don't use the category that's specific to human resources. And Mr. Hill and I have talked in the future budget, we want to include that category so we have more specifics about that area.
That's where it would move in the future. Once we have that HR category, this would move to that from the IT category.
Is Frontline the current system we're using to reach out to substitutes? Are we still doing that?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, will they not give us a group?
We've been doing a lot of
Mr. Hale's been doing some pretty strong negotiations.
Good at that.
Those prices were a lot higher the other day, but yeah.
Anybody else?
So,
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
So, and I was looking at them face to face on that comparison chart, but the way we're doing it right here, this is about 5,000 more.
It is a little more expensive. We called references. We also, we have both systems. We have Power School, which was the other,
Right.
and we have Frontline. Frontline is associated mostly with our personnel already.
Okay.
But the references that were called, nothing negative about Power School, but the Frontline references were a lot more
Cleaner.
complimentary and much stronger and supported us, justifying that $5,000 difference.
Okay.
Anybody else? Let's vote, please, Jennifer.
Voting is open. All
Thank you. All right, next is our policy. There's several. I recommend we group and approve all together unless someone wants to pull even one out, one or two, whatever. Ms. Keith is here to tell us anything and hopefully answer any question.
Would you like for me to read the numbers, or can I just group them all at once?
If you want to make a motion to group them,
Let's hear you read the numbers.
Do I
Unless you
have
want
to
to
read
read
the
it.
numbers?
This is to waive first and pass on second.
I know
Yes.
every one of them is like that. Do I need to read the numbers for you, Jennifer?
Yeah.
I can,
No.
Is-
And this
Jennifer?
is,
No, thank
I
you.
can
Are there
add.
any
Okay.
changes, are there any major changes in the policy?
Every one of them's got the.
Every one of them.
Major changes?
any major changes in any of these, Ashley, or Ms. Keith?
They're all from the legislative update from Central.
So they're mandatory.
What was, I never could find, what was the definition of a priority student?
I can read it out of chapter 1 if you want. There are 4 different
Like,
sections.
I always thought a priority, it sounded like a priority student would be one who doesn't need to do learning catch up.
Not in that definition, no. It's about students who are at risk. And it asks if we would make it mandatory that they attend summer programs. But there's not a lot of ways to enforce that.
Okay.
Okay, so I'll make a motion that we approve, that we waive first reading and pass on second reading all listed policies in the agenda.
Have a motion, have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Ms. Fogle, Jennifer, please.
Voting is open. All approved.
Thank you. And then next on the agenda, we added WCEA. Ms. France?
Thank you for adding us. Jennifer has forwarded the calendar to me, so I will meet the deadline to get it on there. We just want to thank Mr. Boyd and Cindy Hayes, Cindy Purcell, and Heather Riddle for making it, for approving that we continue to do the new hire breakfast for teachers, and that we had an opportunity to speak to the new hires. And Heather she wanted to make sure, it was amazing. She just kept coming back to make sure that all the drawings worked out, because the drawings are one of our favorite things. And she wanted to make sure that all worked out, and it's just so easy to communicate with these people. And Mr. Hale, I could turn around and probably point people out and say thank you, but they aren't on the, what I sent her for approval, so, thank you.
Thank you.
Hope your school year's off to a good start.
Yes. I'm loving being back in the classroom with kids, and they're loving it back.
I would like to say real quick that I was really impressed too with the opening of their in-service. I thought it really went well, and appreciated your support for everyone, and I thought the door prizes were really nice. Somebody worked very hard getting things
They
together.
certainly did.
Yeah.
That was months of gathering. I
Oh,
think.
it was great. Yeah.
Yes, it went well. In the afternoon, the teachers were in focus groups, and, everyone certainly did what those groups were intended. They focused on professional learning.
Great.
It was a good day, and a good start to the school year with everybody.
Thank you.
Okay, my only other thing I have is our next upcoming meeting is August 24th, our workshop at 5 p.m. And I want to wish Jason a speedy recovery. And glad the school year's started.
Need to actually pray for Emmy.
Well, that's true, that's true. We probably need to send a little bell to
Yeah.
him,
Yeah.
Did you say the 24th?
24th at 5 p.m. is our
I've got a
workshop.
collaborative conference down for that. Was that canceled?
No, ma'am, it'd be prior to.
So we'll do that right after.
Just prior to.
Okay, we can do that.
Ms. Buchanan?
So I would like to ask if it is possible for us to get our votes up on these screens so that it can be seen over. I just,
Keith is here with a request.
well, I have
But
been
you're right.
approached several times because it almost seems like a secret ballot,
Okay,
and that's not,
not intended to be.
no, I know it's not intended to be, but it does,
Right.
come off that way. And so we need to be very transparent, and that needs to go up on the screen so the audience and whoever's watching.
And after, when the agenda or the meeting minutes are approved, all of that is reflected in the meeting minutes. Yes, ma'am. But definitely on a live action, we
Well,
want
they're
to
going to
have.
take time to watch us. I think they deserve
I
that.
understand, you're right. If we can make it happen in a sufficient way, then we'll implement the practice of reading off the final votes each
Okay,
time.
thank you.
Anybody else have anything?
Football time in Tennessee.
It's coming up. First game's August 20th.
I hope our two high schools do good.
Me too.
When was our, retirement? Or, yes, retirement is.
Yes, the 24th is a big day.
Is it the 24th?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah.
How was the HEW meeting today?
No, it's the 23rd.
Okay. The meeting today, we had a couple of items on there. One item was what we had already received approval from them in the sense of budgeting. We went back and asked for the final amount for buses, for this year's buses, and the technology. So they did approve that. The stadiums, they did not approve, but they felt like there was some more information that was needed, particularly in our ESSER plan. Originally for this year, using those capital funds, it was on the plan for the Boone and Crockett upgrades to be a part of the capital funds. But they felt like until we get approval from the state to utilize ESSER dollars to pay for those upgrades, then they would be in a better position to consider approval of the stadium upgrade. So they want that to happen first, which is understandable. And then the third was just an awareness for them about the LED project. And they certainly are interested. Wanted them to know the timeline that with all of the things happening and applications being approved and legal review, that it'll come back to them in September, and then go to the budget committee, and then hopefully go to the full commission in the September meeting for final approval of the low interest loan through the state program. And then once that happens, they do a resolution for that loan, and everything's done and that's approved. The work will start fairly soon after that. So those are the three items in here today. The first items got approved, everything else was pushed to the next meeting.
All right, anybody else? We're adjourned.
Thanks, sir.